Anybody else get the feeling that the car is going downhill at a fast speed with the brake lines cut? Jared Spurgeon out of the lineup tonight, plus multiple investigations being conducted within the Minnesota Wild executive offices. We'll discuss all that and more on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked on Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new content throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we build off of what we reported yesterday with Chris O'Hearn and the Minnesota Wild agreeing to part ways. Now there are reports that there have been a couple of investigations into front office executives for the Minnesota Wild, so we'll tell you the latest. Also, we'll talk about tonight's game against the Calgary Flames, in which there will be no Jared Spurgeon. So a lot to get to here on today's show. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So we talked yesterday about the decision by the Minnesota Wild to agree to mutually part ways with assistant general manager Chris O'Hearn. And we talked about the suddenness of this move, and also the fact that there could be more that was going on. And lo and behold, this morning, Michael Russo and Joe Smith hinting at exactly that. In the article for The Athletic that Russo and Smith have been tag teaming on, there are multiple investigations into Wild executives by an outside firm that have been commissioned by the organization. Also, Russo noting when the Wild cryptically confirmed to The Athletic on Wednesday that they had mutually agreed to part ways with O'Hearn, it created new uncertainty for a front office already trying to navigate salary cap hell and the complicated nature of its second venture into long-term injured reserve with the recent injury to defenseman Jonas Brodin. What we know about what led to this is this. In recent weeks, there have been two investigations into the Wild front office. Members of the team's hockey support staff, hockey operations department, and business staff began being interviewed regarding the second one by two attorneys December 1st after the team returned home from a road game in Nashville. O'Hearn was not the subject of that latter investigation, and it's unknown the specific nature of any allegations against him. It appears that the first investigation just happened to conclude at the same time the second one was being conducted. What is interesting is that O'Hearn was the front office representative on the Wild's latest 4-game road trip, which ended Sunday in Seattle. He didn't give the appearance that anything was amiss, being around the team in his normal jovial fashion and answering questions from reporters about the team likely needing to go to long-term injured reserve. Agents who have spoken to him in recent weeks said it was business as usual. Folks, that's because this is not, in my reading all of what is going on here, this is not something that has anything to do with the contract extensions, anything related to anything going on the ice, because you don't up and agree to move on from your assistant general manager that handles contracts and navigating the salary cap during the middle of a season for simply poor performance. You don't make those types of decisions because of poor performance, because of players not playing up to the level that is expected with said extensions. This does not, it appears, have anything to do with what is going on the ice. And furthermore, the personnel move that was made to reflect a disappointment in what we have seen on the ice was moving on from Dean Evison. That's the end of the story right there. Any other moves that would be made to further underscore the disappointment in how the on-ice product has done would be handled in the offseason. I don't believe this has anything to do with the on-ice product or any cap-related contracts or anything along those lines. And the fact that the team has had an outside firm come in and run independent investigations to get to the bottom of what is going on further underscores, I think, the point that this is not anything to do with what's going on the ice. The hope, I guess, in this situation is that the first investigation was made to determine what was going on one end and whether or not there was any more widespread that was going on throughout the rest of the organization. But as I read the piece from Michael Russo, it sounds like it's two different things. And so I have really no horse in the race, no intel on what's going on. But if I'm being completely honest, it feels like this is going to get worse before it gets better. How often are these types of situations as cut and dry as, hey, we found something was going on within the organization that we do not adhere to, we do not approve of, and so now we're going to make sure that it isn't going on at other levels of the organization? How often is it as cut and dry as that? We know how the Corey Perry situation was handled in a similar fashion, where you had kind of this cryptic lack of information on the front end, and then the contract for Perry was terminated, and the team moves on as such. We don't know hardly any of the details as to what's going on with this situation for the Minnesota Wild, but I'll tell you one thing: if there's anybody that's going to find out what is going on, it's Michael Russo. And so the fact that you have two investigations going on is not something that should be taken lightly in the slightest. And the fact that, as Russo notes, Bill Guerin has gone quiet over the last few days, when he usually is as accessible of a front office person as you'll find in the league, that also tells you that this is a situation that probably is a little higher on the concern scale than just simply something that needed to be dealt with. Independent organization coming in to conduct an investigation, not once but twice, it's concerning. And so we really don't have a ton in the way of new information to pass along, other than that there have been multiple investigations, and at some point there will be information revealed, likely in the way of other personnel maybe being shown the door. But this is not a move that's made during the season because of performance on the ice. You simply do not do it that way in any level, sport or otherwise. You don't do it a second time if you have already done something to reflect the poor performance of the product. You don't do it again. And so I don't believe this has anything to do with the on-ice product. I will further underscore that point. I don't think this has anything to do with the on-ice product. The other points of this that we have pointed out a couple of times is the reports that O'Hearn had just recently signed an extension. That again is not, this is not a move that's made unless it absolutely had to be made. And doing things like that, like agreeing to part ways with an assistant general manager, are usually not for good reasons. So that's as far as I can go on that. But as we saw just in a 24-hour cycle, the news went from, oh, okay, that's kind of odd timing, that's kind of weird, to, yeah, there's something going on. So I hope I'm wrong, that this situation doesn't get any worse than it seems to be, but investigations like this usually aren't done to try to point out the good things that a team or an organization is doing. You're bringing somebody in that has no ties to try to get to the bottom of something that should not be happening, so that those that are involved can be held accountable. So we'll, as we always do, Locked on Wild will keep you up to date with everything that we know. But beyond that, that's as much as you're going to get. Now, not only that, but we have a game going on tonight, and the Wild are going to be pretty shorthanded defensively against the Calgary Flames. We'll talk about the latest loss defensively for the Wild as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is incredibly easy to use, and if you win, there are a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. How are things looking for tonight's game against the Calgary Flames? The Minnesota Wild are minus 146 on the money line. Calgary Flames come in at plus 122. And if you're looking for more particulars from this game, anytime goal scorer Kirill Kaprizov currently plus 130. Joel Eriksson Ek plus 175. How about Matt Boldy, who has been absolutely red hot lately? He's at plus 200 for the Flames. Nazem Kadri at plus 210 for those anytime goal scorers. So whichever you choose, head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Unfortunately, no postcast tonight. I have some traveling that I'll be doing that will prevent me from being able to get back in a timely manner after the game is done. And so we'll have some thoughts as to what we see in tonight's game, and we'll also get you ready for Saturday's game against Vancouver for tomorrow's episode. So you can make sure to tune in for that coming up in the morning, and hopefully we're recapping another Minnesota Wild win here this evening, because it's not going to be easy for the Wild, who now have fallen further behind the eight ball from a health perspective, as Jared Spurgeon is not going to play in this one tonight. He is officially day-to-day, and it is interesting because John Hines kind of went out of his way to point out that it wasn't necessarily anything that happened in the game against the Calgary Flames. He just is he's just banged up, is what Hines said in particular. And so you're not going to have him at the ready for this game tonight, which means that the decor for the Minnesota Wild is going to be something here in this one tonight. So let's take a look at what we have for pairings for right now, because, oh boy, this is not going to be great. So you have the likes of, on the good side, you have the likes of Jake Middleton, Brock Faber, both in the lineup. Dakota Mermis slotting into the lineup here tonight as well. You got Zach Bogosian in the lineup also. And so you've got 4 playable defensemen for the most part that will be part of this one here this evening. But then you're also going to have Alex Goligoski and John Merrill in the lineup, in addition to those other 4. And I found it funny. I'm trying to find the tweet as of right now, but somebody tweeted out in response to the decisions with the lines that it's almost as if all of the responsible defensemen for the Minnesota Wilds are babysitting one of the others, which is, I think, a hilarious way to put that. But you're missing so much from those top 2 guys, and you're already trying to replace Jonas Brodin in the lineup, but now you don't have the ability to get your captain in the lineup. You're missing Brodin and Spurgeon on the penalty kill. I think from a power play perspective, this is probably good news because it means that we're going to likely see Brock Faber get a ton of power play time in this one tonight. But here's the other side of the coin. Is now Brock Faber is going to be playing number 1 defenseman minutes. He's going to be playing number 1 penalty kill. He's going to be playing number 1 power play. You're also going to be having Jake Middleton play a high level of minutes. And honestly, that's how it should be, is you really should lean on the combinations of whatever the pairings end up being. Faber, Middleton, Bogosian, and Mermis. Lean on those 4 and just sparingly sprinkle in Goligoski and Merrill. I mean, I don't have to reveal the shocking news that I would much rather see Damon Hunt play in this game. He isn't. But if there are some glaring breakdowns in this one, then I'll be shocked if he doesn't play on Saturday against Vancouver. So this is going to be all about trying to just hang on and survive in this game, to just try to do whatever you can offensively to take all the pressure in the world off of Philip Gustafsson and the rest of the defense. I don't envision this being any sort of a clean defensive effort, but then again, we could be wrong. I just imagine this is going to be one of those gritty kind of 6-5 wins unless Philip Gustafsson stands on his head, because you're losing out on a ton of just being in the right place at the right time and making plays to prevent the other team from scoring, and just a ton of intangibles that you can't replicate from Spurgeon and also from Brodin. Now, we saw the Wild get through one game without Brodin against Seattle, but that was a game in which Spurgeon was in the lineup. So this is going to be a tough test for this Wild defense tonight against the Calgary Flames. And it's a Calgary Flames team that certainly is disappointed so far this season, but they still have plenty of players that are capable of scoring in bunches. Some guys that should be scoring far more than they are. And so we'll just have to see what happens here in this one. But folks, I am tired. I am tired of the number of games in which this team just has been woefully short of being fully healthy. And now tonight, you're missing 2 of your probably 5 most important players on the team, and they're both on the defensemen. So Philip Gustafsson's going to have to do a lot of this himself in tonight's game. And thankfully, recently, he has performed much better, but I don't envy him having to do the whole thing himself in this game tonight. So we'll see what happens, but I wouldn't plan on seeing a crisp 3-2 win here in this one tonight, just with the players that are out of the lineup. I don't think it's going to be that way. Now, as for the Calgary Flames, and how they're doing coming into this game. We will discuss that as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is also brought to you by Athletic Greens. The number one most important thing about our health is making sure that we are getting a full dose of vitamins and supplements into our system. And it's hard a lot of times. You're trying to get multiple different vitamins and supplements into your system all at once. You're trying to leave the house in a timely manner. There just isn't enough time in the day to focus as much time as you need on your health. And this is where AG1 comes in. All you have to do is take 1 scoop of AG1 and mix it with a glass of water, and you're filling your body with 75 high-quality vitamins and minerals and giving yourself an energy boost to boot. No more powering down at your computer on your lunch break. AG1 is here to help you be healthy and energetic throughout your day. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out today. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, a reminder, unfortunately, no postcast tonight, but we will be at the X in person on Saturday for the game against Vancouver. We'll have some thoughts from tonight's action, as well as a preview of the Vancouver game coming up for you tomorrow on Locked on Wild. So make sure to tune in then as we are hopefully talking about another win here this evening. So looking at Vancouver and for the Canucks, they have been scuffling as of late. They are have just 1 win in their last 6 games. And beyond that, they are 1-4-1 in their last 6 games. That includes losses to Vancouver 4-3, the Minnesota Wild 5-2. They beat Carolina by a score of 3-2, but then lost to New Jersey 4-2, Colorado 6-5, and the Vegas Golden Knights 5-4 in overtime. So the goaltending has really fallen off since Jacob Markstrom was put on injured reserve. And folks, it's not a Calgary team that is particularly good in at least one half of the special teams department. They are at 11.4% on the power play, 4th worst in the NHL. They're averaging 3 goals per game so far this season. And if you look at the wonderful world of penalty minutes, they're also one of the least penalized teams in the NHL, although they have a ton of work to go to try to catch the St. Louis Blues, who are the least penalized team. But the Minnesota Wilds around the top of the list, but certainly not. They're in the top 10, but not anywhere near the top. They've got a long way to go to catch the Anaheim Ducks. But power play wise, the Wild have the edge there by a few percentage points. Penalty kill wise, the Wild's still dead last. But again, Montreal, Ottawa, the New York Islanders, and the San Jose Sharks all trying to make some noise for that worst penalty kill in the league spot. And the Calgary Flames actually have a pretty good kill themselves at 82.4%. But the big story for Calgary this year is the continued disappearance of one Jonathan Huberdeau. He has, in 29 games, 4 goals and 11 assists, 15 total points. He is a -13 on the season. He has no points in the month of December so far, after having 10 points on 2 goals and 8 assists in the month of November. He has not scored a goal since November 20th. And don't worry, I'm knocking on my desk so that I don't jinx this. He hasn't scored since November 20th, and he has not had a point since November 30th against the Dallas Stars. He is pointless in his last 6 games and is collectively a -3 in that span with just 3 total shots too. Just 3 total shots in that span. But the big thing here is that this is a player that the Wild cannot afford to let get going, especially shorthanded defensively. You've got to continue to make it tough for Huberdeau to get going, and you'll take your chances with the likes of Nazem Kadri, Blake Coleman, Igor Sharangovich, who are all the top goal scorers for the Flames so far this year. Now, Chris Tanev is not going to play in tonight's game, so the Flames also shorthanded on the back end. But make no mistake, if the Wild are going to win this game, it comes down to the offense. The offense has to lead the way in this game and has to continue to push, because if they can take pressure off of the Wild defensively, and most importantly of all, get some goals on the board, then that defense is not going to be as pressured to be perfect as they would if this was a close game. And you're waiting for a breakdown to happen that gives the Flames the go-ahead goal late. You've got to continue to push offensively and try to keep yourself in front. This is a driver game, as I like to call it. You gotta get out to an early lead, and you have to just continue to hold things down. You can't let Calgary back in to this game, or let them dictate the pace early, because you can't be chasing in this type of a game. So if we're looking at keys to the game for tonight's matchup, offense has to lead. This is a team that we've heard in previous weeks, previous games, previous seasons, has relied on their defense and their goaltending. Offense has to take the lead in this one tonight. And so if you can get good offensive pressure, good contributions from everybody up and down the lineup, that'll go a long way towards taking pressure off of the number 2 key. Philip Gustafsson's got to be on his game. He has to be the one to bail out the defense. Oftentimes you hope that your defense can make things easy for your goalie. Gustafsson's got to be the one that takes the lead in that aspect here in this game tonight. Otherwise, it's going to get potentially ugly in that you're winning, 6-5 or even 5-4, depending on how things play out. And the final key of the night is Matt Boldy has been taking the lead here over these last few games. He has 6 goals in the last 7 games. So Matt Boldy has taken the lead. When will the Kirill Kaprizov production come back? There was a graphic that was put out on Twitter by moneypuck.com talking about the players throughout the NHL that have had the least amount of luck. And there were a few metrics that they used to track that notion, in that the shooter skill for particular players, how high of a percentage, how much higher should their shooting percentage be based on their skill level? And Kirill Kaprizov and Marcus Johansson were both near the top of the list. And so are we starting to now see Kirill Kaprizov fall into the snake bitten and unlucky category, whereas before it simply was him not being able to really do anything? Time will tell. And hopefully in tonight's instance, hopefully he's able to get a goal or two just to get the confidence back and to reward what has seemed like better play for him over the last few games. So those are my keys tonight. Hopefully the Wild are able to come away with a win, and we'll have more on it for you coming up tomorrow here on Locked On Wild. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends about Locked On Wild. If they don't yet subscribe, they certainly can join in on the conversations by following us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platforms, so you don't miss out on any new content throughout the week. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.